Hey dudes, welcome to Splat from the Past, the only 80s themed horror and sci-fi show where things can get totally radical. Now today, I will be welcoming the director of the very first Leprechaun movie, Mark Jones. Yes, I'm going to be talking to Mark Jones about that movie. He also directed the horror comedic version of Rumplestiltskin. And he started out in animation, writing for cartoons. He wrote for Mr. Magoo, the Scooby and Scrappy Doo show, Heathcliff, and he also wrote for Stephen J. Cannell series, like Riptide, The A-Team, Rousters, etc. And that's a very interesting career. So I'm going to have him on and talk about all that stuff. Also, I'd like to say rest in peace to another Mark Blum, from Desperately Seeking Susan, Crocodile Dundee, Worth Winning, so many great 80s movies. I reached out to him back in January. At first he said no, but then he said later, get back to me, like I think in June or something. And sadly, he had to succumb to the coronavirus, which is so fucking sad. So rest in peace, Mark Blum. I'll get somebody from Desperately Seeking Susan on for its 35th anniversary, some way, somehow, because I love that movie so much. But here is my interview with another Mark Jones.
Hello.
Hey, Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm glad to be there. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you in this crazy time?
Well, I'm actually sitting out in the backyard having a cigar.
Oh.
That's how I handle it.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I've just been staying inside the whole time. But it's such an honor. Thank you for taking the time today.
Oh, no problem. I love anybody. I love talking about this stuff.
Yes. So going back in time, I know that you started out in animation. Did you gravitate toward animation and film early on in your childhood?
Well, you know, I was always interested. I actually, as a young kid, I loved the Disney cartoons and cartoons in general, and I always wanted to be an animator. Mm-hmm. And I got into, right out of high school, I got into Xeroxing the animation drawings onto the cells for Patty Freeling, which was doing Saturday morning cartoons in the 70s. And, excuse me, and the animators kept saying, you know, you're not, don't be an animator, become a writer. Mm-hmm. That's where the money and the power is. So I wasn't as good an animator as I should have been, and so I started to read scripts and got involved and then started writing animated shows and got pretty successful and developed and wrote a lot of shows for the networks, for Ruby Spears, Hanna-Barbera, you know, Scooby-Doo, Captain Caveman, and all these shows that the kids are too young to remember.
Oh, I remember them all.
Yeah, so then, you know, and then I produced television animated shows, and for Ruby Spears, and then basically I wanted to get into live action. Everybody who writes animation wants to get into live action. There's bigger money and it's, you know, prime time, and yeah. So I got into a guy named Glenn A. Larson who had a lot of shows on the air. He created Battlestar Galactica and
right. All
Guy and Knight Rider, etc. Around 1980, I met him, and he said, "Why don't you come over and write at Universal for BJ and the Bear and Sheriff Lobo as a writer?" And so that's how I got into primetime television. But I always wanted to make movies. I mean, as a kid, not just as an animator, but I used to go out with my Bolex 16-millimeter camera, and I used to go out and shoot little movies and stuff. So I always wanted to direct, and I sort of figured I would use television writing to get me into, get me in a position to direct. And then I finally wrote Leprechaun and attached myself as director, and that was the first movie I ever did.
Mm-hmm. Did you go from college to cartoons?
Oh, no, I barely got out of high school. I was just wanted to get into the business. I hated school. I was not a good student. I was a pretty avid reader. I loved reading stuff, but I would read instead of school books. I would go to the library and read books on movies and animation and just how they make movies and stuff. So my parents, I think, were smart enough to say this guy's not a college guy. So, hopefully he won't end up in jail. And since I got right out of high school, I got in to the animation studios. I think they were happy. They figured, okay, he's going to go that way.
Yeah, he's got a job.
Exactly.
Well, a lot of parents want. So, you wrote some really good cartoons in those days. Mr. Magoo, Scooby and Scrappy Doo, Heathcliff. Was writing on those shows pretty lucrative in those days?
They were. They actually were. I remember excuse me, I got Joe Barbera brought me in to do Captain Caveman and Scooby and Scrappy and all those shows. And the money was very good. I mean, we were, I was able to buy a condo. And oddly enough, I think they paid more back then relatively than they do now for animation. But at the time, we were getting like $2,500 a script.
Mm-hmm.
And that was back in 1978,
Yeah.
70. So it actually was lucrative. And then I got into Ruby Spears, and I produced like Puppy's New Adventure, Rubik, The Amazing Cube, and I wrote the pilots for those shows. I wrote the pilots for the Mr. T cartoon show, Turbo Teen, Puppy's New Adventures, Rubik, The Amazing Cube. So, and then became a producer on those shows. So animation was very lucrative. Live action, there was more money in it, but, and I wanted to get into that. But, yeah, I mean, I was making a good living as an animation writer. So I was under contract at the studio, so did good.
I'm fascinated with cartoon writing. This is it like a sitcom where someone comes in and pitches an idea for a story and then someone writes it?
You mean yeah? Well, what we did is we had a lot of staff writers in animation, but yeah, in the freelance, and I started as a freelance. You would read the Bible and the pilot script of the cartoon show, and then you'd come up with a bunch of premises. And if they liked the premise, the network approved it. You would do a story, and if they liked the story, you'd go and do an actual script. Pretty much like live action was done too.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to be very creative and come. I mean, I used to come into animation studios like Super Friends. I started writing on Super Friends, and I would come in with a dozen premises and hope they picked one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And did you watch the cartoons constantly to get ideas for what stories you were writing?
Yeah. I used to I used to watch the cartoons all the time, and as a kid I loved cartoons and Saturday morning. But yeah, we were when I was freelancing. When I started freelancing, I would watch everything and go get the Bibles from all the studios and just inundate them with premises for every show. A lot of shows I would give 10 premises, 15 premises, and not even get a bite. So it was it was kind of you had to get a lot out there, like shotgun it. But once I started writing Super Friends as a freelancer, that's when Joe Barbera decided to bring me on under contract.
Mm-hmm. It's like when you're writing for a sitcom or a late night talk show, you have to write 50 jokes a day, and you're lucky if one ends up in the final product.
Yeah, and animation was like that because a lot of the shows were like 10 minutes, and I think I wrote Popeyes, which they had some 6-minute episodes, and so they had a lot of individual episodes, so they needed to, you had to really put out a lot of work just to get one. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I know, it's insane. You wrote for a lot of Stephen J. Cannell shows like Riptide, The A-Team, and this one had me laugh out loud, The Rousters.
You know what? The Rousters was one of my favorite shows. I think we had the record for the lowest rated show at that time, in prime time. It was, I think it was around 83, around 82 or 83. It was funny because in those days, we ended up getting like a 14 share or 15 share, which was terrible because shows were getting canceled with 25 and 26 shares. Of course, a 14 share today is a major hit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't even think Big Bang gets 14s. They might, but it's like everything's relative. There were only 3 networks. But I love that show. It had Chad Everett and Jim Varney, who was the Ernest character, and Mimi Rogers.
Hoyt Axton.
Yeah, and it was a interesting show, but we were against Love Boat. We were on NBC, and we were against Love Boat. But I worked a few years at Cannell. I was under contract there. I love Steve. He was great. He's great to work with. Unfortunately, passed away a while ago, a relatively young age, 69. But he, the A-Team. I mean, he was. I was at Cannell when he was on top of his game. So that was a lot of fun doing those shows.
Yeah, I remember watching that show on A&E in the 90s, and to me, Cannell, he was the best TV writer there ever was. He was really, a dyslexic, savant flooded with creativity, that guy.
He was, and he was a sweet guy. He loved writers. He respected writers. They gave us. He had the 4th floor of the building that was, I think, on La Brea and Hollywood Boulevard, and he had the 4th floor just for writers, and he gave us beautiful offices, and he had different kinds of interior decorating, like you could get the green scheme or the brown scheme or yellow, and they brought in couches. So he was a great guy to work with and incredibly talented. I mean, I learned a lot from him. I would read his scripts when he would write a script for a show, and it'd come in and we'd all get depressed because he was so much better than we were. He'd say, I'm going to punch out an A-Team episode, and, over the weekend he'd write one and he'd bring it in Monday, and we'd be going, oh, God, why can't we write as good as him? But he was a very talented guy.
Mm-hmm, very. You also wrote for the Superboy series. How was that?
Well, actually, that was great because I came in and they had done one season, and I met with Elia Solkine, and they wanted to change the show. The ratings were not that great, but they were good enough to be picked up. And I looked at the first season. I said, you guys are doing Superboy's going after bank robbers and stuff. I said, let's bring in big super villains. And I was the guy who changed on the second season. We got rid of Lex Luthor, and I brought in the new Lex Luthor. We also brought in this guy, Andy McAllister, who was Superboy's best friend. Mm-hmm. So we really changed the show and then brought in all the Metallo and Bizarro. I wrote the first 2-parter Bizarro episode, and we kind of went back to the Superboy comics, and it turned the show around, and the ratings really went up. So I was fun to do because I was a DC comic book guy, not a Marvel guy. I always read the DC comics, Superboy and Superman and Justice League and Jimmy Olsen. And so when I was brought over to to run the show as the writer with Cary Bates, who used to be a comic book writer, he was a big comic book writer. He was on the first season, and he stayed on for the second season. But we really that was a lot of fun because those were half hours. We shot them in Florida at Universal Studios in Orlando, and that was a great year and a half. And the guy named David Nutter was one of our resident directors. David Nutter is probably directed every pilot of every major television show around. And he was starting out then, and he was a really great director, and he did a bunch of episodes for us, and so that was a fun show. It was a very fun show to do.
Mm-hmm. And then you worked on Knight Rider?
Yeah, I came into Knight Rider on the 5th season, and produced Knight Rider with a bunch of other producers on that, and Universal gave me a deal, and they sort of put me on the show, but that wasn't the greatest experience But it was interesting. We had a lot of producers on that show, and a lot of politics. But I came in and I worked a season on it.
Mm-hmm. So what's the genesis of Leprechaun?
Well, I always watched the Lucky Charms commercials, and I said, okay, the leprechauns are so popular, and nobody's done a horror movie with a leprechaun. They've done Friday the 13th, and for Jason and Halloween, and I said nobody's done a St. Patty's Day. So I wanted to direct, and I figured the only way I'm going to really direct is if I write a low-budget horror movie and attach myself. And right after Superboy, that's what I did. And I got it over to Trimark at the time, and they wanted to make the movie. They didn't want me to direct because even though I had written and produced television, I had never directed television at that point. And they offered me a lot of money to just sell them the script, and I said the only reason I wrote it was to direct. And so we finally made a deal. And but it was kind of, I guess the genesis was the Lucky Charms commercials and the fact that there was no St. Patty's Day horror movie.
Mm-hmm. It was the first film for Trimark, right?
It was their first big theatrical. Yeah, their first original. They went theatrical, and it was their biggest hit. And it's still, well, let's see, they've done, they've done 8 of them already. Sci-Fi just did one last year, which they went back to the first one, where you went back to the original farmhouse and the well, and they brought in the Ozzy character from the first movie I did, and 25 years later. And I actually thought they did a good job. They didn't use Warwick, but they used a guy that really was a very good leprechaun, and he was very close to Warwick's style. But yeah, that was a huge hit for Trimark. We're still fighting over the money they owe me. We'll be fighting over that for years.
Yeah, which often happens in the industry, unfortunately, especially then. So the original script was darker, but Warwick brought a more comedic element to it, right?
Yeah, what happened is the original script that I wrote was very dark, no personality, just kind of similar to the Leprechaun origins, which I heard nobody liked. I didn't like it. That they tried to do that, and that didn't quite work. But when Warwick came in, when we were going to get Warwick, I said, he's such a good actor. And when I met with him, I said, let's change it around. Let's make it sort of a comedy horror. And so we did a big rewrite, and Warwick was pivotal to that. And I think it was the right way to go because it became a character that people sort of love. So if we didn't have Warwick, it probably would have stayed as just a sort of a straight horror film, and I bet we wouldn't have had all the sequels we had.
Yeah. How did you find Warwick? I mean, I knew he was kind of he's kind of known off of doing Willow.
Yeah, our casting director brought him up, and I said, "Oh, he was great in Willow." They said, "Well, he's in England. You got to send him the script." And we were reading different little people, and I said, "Gee, if we could get this guy, he came off a big movie," and we did send him the script, and he ended up really liking it, and then had a number of phone conversations, and really wanted to come out. Actually, it was a very sad part of it, and he actually talks about it in his book. He had a child who had passed away about 10 days old, and he and his wife were, obviously, very, very struck by that, and he actually wanted to leave England and get in a whole new environment, he and his wife, and they did come out. That was also part of the reason that he took it. He said, to go to America, get involved in this, help me get over losing that child. And he and his wife came out, and they were great. And he since has had 3 more children, and they're doing fine. But that was sort of a little bit of a tragedy for him, that part of the motivation to get out here and do the movie.
What about Jennifer Aniston? Was she difficult to work with?
No, she was great, and she she really wanted the part. And I always tell this story. Trimark gets mad at me, or the executives, because they all want to take credit. Mm-hmm. They didn't really want Jennifer. They wanted another girl who was blonde, and Jennifer was in the running up. We kept calling her back to read with the lead actor, and they called in this other girl who was very good, but I really, really did see something in Jennifer. She just walked into a room, and she had that charisma. And I said, we got to have her. And she really had no credits. She'd done a couple of television things. And so I just kind of really, really pushed to get Jennifer. And at one point had to tell Trimark, I'll bleach your hair blonde. Mm-hmm. And I know Mark Amin, and he's great. He was the head of Trimark. It came up to him, and he didn't remember it. So and he may not have. I do remember it. And he sort of said, okay, but try to make her hair blonde. And, of course, I told Jennifer that. She was like, Mark, I don't want to bleach my hair. I like my hair. I said, no, we're not going to do it. I just said we're going to do it, and you just start the movie. They're not going to shut it down because we didn't lighten your hair. So, but she was great. I mean, she was she was such a pro. She was on time. She had a great sense of humor. And she just, that was her first movie. It was my first movie. And so we were both kind of like really excited and had a lot of fun. And of course, in retrospect, I think she hates me for giving her that part. She tries to avoid it as much as she can.
Yeah.
I bumped into her a few times, and she's always told me, she goes, Mark, I loved working on that movie at the time. It was the best thing I've ever done. And she actually was interviewed, I think, on Howard Stern recently, and mentioned how it became a cult classic. And at the time, she thought, this was it. I've arrived. I'm a lead in a movie. So we never took it too serious, but she was great. She was wonderful.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. How about working with Mark Holton?
I love Mark Holton. It's funny. I found him. We used him on a Superboy, mm-hmm. and he had played a character on a Superboy episode, and of course I knew he was Pee-wee. He was Francis from Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I'm working on a script, and I got a character you'd be perfect for. And how many people bumped into people in parties and said that. And then about a year later, I called him up and I said, I want you to do Ozzy. And he was great. And the funny thing is, Trimark wanted him to read. And I said, guys, this is a small movie. We got the guy from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. He's a terrific actor. And they made me read him like 2 or 3 times. And he obviously did great, and they okayed it. But Trimark was very tough at that point. But we got it through. But Mark was great.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's on my dream list of people to get this year, so I hope I get to.
If you do, say I keep meaning to get an email phone number. I think he's moved into he's somewhere out of state.
Yeah.
I need to reconnect because he did such a great job on the last Leprechaun. I wanted to get a hold of him.
Yeah. What did you think of the sequels?
I had a different direction. I thought the sequel should have been Leprechaun's wife comes looking for him, and Warwick would play him and play his wife in drag. And it could be funny because nobody talks about leprechauns having wives or even female leprechauns. Trimark wanted to do that. I ended up, it was fine. I mean, I produced, I was one of the producers on number 2, and I don't know, I would have gone a little different direction, but they were, the movie was working, so they wanted to do number 2, and so it was okay. It turned out okay. It wasn't my favorite. I actually thought when they got Leprechaun in the Hood and Back to the Hood, I got it. The urban audience loved Leprechaun. I thought individually they were all good on their own. The Vegas one was I liked that. The one in space, I would have to say, was not my favorite.
Yeah.
I thought it went a little over the top, but I listen. They have to send me a check every time they make one, so I'm happy. But I thought Warwick protected the character. That was important. That's what really works. And Warwick kept the character throughout the sequels, and he did a great job. So that's what I was happy with.
Yeah, I personally love the one where they're in Vegas, Part 3, and I actually got Brian Trenchard Smith coming on tomorrow to talk about 3 and 4. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm pretty excited.
I think I came down to the set on number 4, but I didn't have anything to do. But don't tell him I don't think number 4 was the best.
Okay, I won't.
I'm kidding.
So whatever possessed you of turning a classic fairy tale like Rumplestiltskin into a horror comedy?
Well, I had I had pretty good success with when Leprechaun came out, and I always thought that Rumplestiltskin, I remember the story, and it was kind of creepy. It was like this little dwarf who wants to steal a baby. And I said, since leprechauns, people thought they were kind of happy, cheery creatures, and that worked. So I wrote the script. I actually wrote the script for Joe Ruby of Ruby Spears, the actual Rumplestiltskin, because I was still in touch with Joe. We're good friends. And I said, let's write the script. And it got to Dino De Laurentiis. And Dino De Laurentiis read it and called me and my partner at the time, Michael Prescott, who was my producing partner on Leprechaun. And he was sort of kind of not really doing anything, and he had just, one of his companies went bankrupt, but he had a beautiful building in Beverly Hills. I mean, Dino always figured it out. But he said, I want to make it. It was a small movie. I mean, at the time, it was like $3 million, which was actually pretty good for 95 for a low-budget movie. And Dino just basically said, give me a budget, and he liked the script, and it was the easiest sell I ever did. And we got a deal, and we went in and made it. And I just thought it was always very creepy, and I thought bringing him into the present time would be interesting. And I liked Rumpelstiltskin. We should have had a sequel, but it got tied up with Spelling Entertainment and Paramount, and so we never got a sequel on that.
Yeah, I just interviewed Marcia Dietland, who played the young mother, but I forgot to ask her about this one. How was she to work with, if you remember?
Well, it's so funny. I had such a crush on Marcia, and I wish you would have brought it up and mentioned it to her. But she was actually, what happened is she was reading for the lead to play the mother, and we kept going back and forth, and I really liked her. We thought she was just a little too young, and Kim Aldrich, who we ended up using, was very good. But it was kind of like she was down to the running, and I really liked her. And I said, I'm going to put you in the movie. And I didn't want to insult her with just a small part, but it was a pivotal part in the opening of the movie. Mm-hmm. But that's really how it came about. She was really considered for the lead, and just nothing to do with her performance. It's just that she was just a little too pretty and young to be, a mother in distress. So that's why she got the carjacking role, because I wanted to put her in the movie. I thought she was adorable.
Yeah, it's hard not to have a crush on Marcia. She's awesome. She's the real deal. Elise Beasley, God, how great was she?
She was really great. She when she came in to read, like I went, okay, that's the one. That's the one. She's perfect. She was, she was there. She was professional. She had come from moonlighting, so she knew the business and had done a lot of stuff. But I had a lot of fun with her. I liked her. She was, really into it. I mean, she took, it was a horror movie, but she said, let's make it the best we can do. And she was great. She was great. I wish we should all get together. All the cast should get together from Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, do like a 25th anniversary screening or something.
Yeah, they did that with Rumpelstiltskin the other year.
Oh, they did?
In Hollywood, yeah, it sold out. I was really surprised. I thought no one would show up, and they wanted me there. And it was at the Chinese in Hollywood Theater, and it was I think it was 2 years ago, and it was actually really a good little event. And I spoke, and a lot of fans, a lot of young people. I was really surprised actually.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, the movie's had a cult success. You know.
Yeah.
How about working with Valerie Wildman?
She was a real pro. She came in, and I liked her. It's funny. I read people for different parts sometimes, and then I really like them, but we have to only pick one for that part. So I always try to. I said I really want to use her, and so we picked her for that. She was very good. I really must say I got very lucky with actors. Never had any attitudes. You know, I'm kind of funny on the set, so maybe I break them down, and they get to like me for that moment until they see the picture. Then they never speak to me again.
Yeah.
But during filming, they were all good. They're all pros.
You worked with another guest of mine, Sadie Katz, on Scorned.
Yes, I've known Sadie for years. Yes, we co-wrote Scorned together.
Yeah, I know that came from, it was based on a breakup she had, right?
Well, that's what she says. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yes, Sadie's a character. I love Sadie.
Yeah.
She's been calling me every other day to make sure I'm okay with this virus. So I said, yes, I'm fine. She's fun. I mean, I think, you know, I met her. She was working for Glenn A. Larson. She was working as his assistant and reading scripts and stuff. That was probably, I'm going to say, 04, 03, you know, a long time ago. But anyway, we became good friends, and you know, she, I don't know how it came about, but I wanted to write something like that, and we would always talk to each other about relationships and commiserate, and so yeah, a lot of it was based on relationships she's had. So you got to be careful. Don't date Sadie Katz, otherwise you'll end up like Scorned.
I just had her on the podcast again last week. I just adore her. You know, any woman who isn't easily offended, she gets my love and respect.
Yeah, no, she's great. She's like one of the guys, and there's no PC with Sadie, which is what I love.
That's what I love too. Yeah. So, do you have any upcoming projects or desired projects during this crazy time?
Well, we had a pilot a television pilot that was going to go, and then of course all production shut down. So I'm actually doing what probably every writer in Hollywood is doing right now, is I'm trying to write a script. But I have an interesting idea for a different kind of movie for me, more of a critical acclaim kind of movie, you know, the ones that could get a nomination. So I'm going to completely change my. I'm going to surprise people. They're going to say the guy who did Leprechaun, Rumplestiltskin, did this movie. So I have an interesting, really dark kind of drama. So that's what I'm working on now. We also have Vamprecon, which was greenlit at one time, and then we got into a lawsuit with somebody. It's a vampire who bites a leprechaun, and it becomes a little Vamprecon. And Warwick actually was interested in doing it, and that script is still out there, believe it or not, and we may get a new franchise. And if we can get Warwick to play it, it will be perfect, because he won't play. I mean, he's not going to be the leprechaun, but he's going to be the personality and the attitude, and he's going to be a little vampire with leprechaun a mixture. So that's out there. But you know, this is crazy. You sell a script, and they're going to make it. You get paid for it, and then it shuts down, and it never gets made. So Leprechaun has had a lot of little ups and downs.
Yeah. Well, I hope it does get made, and I hope it works out for you. I'll be happy when it does. I'll tell you, it sounds like it would be a really good story.
It's fun. We have a good draft that is a lot of fun. We don't take ourselves serious, just like Leprechaun, but we kind of go to the next level. Yeah, I think it'll be. We'll get it made. We'll get it made. If you just stay around long enough, you finally get movies made. It's a very crazy town, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been good to me. I have no complaints.
Is there a genre that you haven't done yet that you'd like to do?
Well, I would really love to do a comedy. And again, I had a development at Orion before they went out of business that was a physical comedy in the vein of not so much Hangover, but just something all out, because I really wanted to be a sitcom writer, and that's how I got into animation and cartoons and funny. But I get into the horror, and I got into action adventure television shows. So I think a real physical comedy is a movie that I'd want to do. And as I said, we had a script at one point that Urkel was attached to, Jaleel White, many years ago. That's 98 or 99, and it got really close to being made. And he was going to play a kid who gets taken by aliens when he's 6 years old, and then 30 years later he comes back to Earth, but he's still got the mind of a 6-year-old, but he's in the body of a 30-year-old, and a lot of physical comedy. So that's probably the genre that I want to do, or I haven't done that I want to.
Nice. I hope you get to, and I hope you stay safe during this crazy time, and I thank you so much, Mark, for coming on the podcast today.
Hey, I appreciate you having me, and where are you located?
I'm in Redding, California.
Oh, so you're under sort of the same things we are, I guess, right? Not as bad.
Absolutely not as bad. We've only had one person die in this town since it happened.
Oh, I'm a great optimist, and I'm postulating that it's not going to be as bad as they think. I think we're going to get through it. So I
think so too. We're going to make it.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate you having me on your show, and I'm going to have to listen to your shows.
Oh, they're a lot of fun. I will, if we connect on Facebook, I'll tag you in this, and you can go listen to my channel and stuff.
Great.
All right.
I know I wasn't as funny and edgy as Sadie, but I gave it my best.
Oh, that's all right. You had some great stories, so that was perfectly fine with me, sir. Have a great day.
All righty, you too, Tommy.
Okay, bye-bye. Well, there you have it. Mark Jones. Ain't he a cool dude? Yeah, he had some great stories there, some great anecdotes about his career. I liked him a lot. Great guy. If you like this video, everyone, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, add me as a friend on Facebook, join my Tommy Kovac comedian page on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and all that fun stuff. Well, that's all the time we have this week on Splat from the Past. Until next time, this is Tommy Throwback Kovac saying, there's no shame in living in the past, because the present sucks. Later, dudes!